So Padmavajra, thank you for doing this. And thank you, Sachikirti, for setting up the lights and the camera. So before this unusual situation started unfolding, the plan was you would be coming to Berlin, to Buddhist Tour Berlin, to do some talks and to meet people and that kind of thing. But seeing as I've landed here at Padmaloka, I thought it'd be a good opportunity to do a kind of question and answer session with the people in Berlin. So I asked them if they had any questions, and actually there was a lot of interesting questions from a lot of different people. So yeah, I thought we'd do this, and here we are.
And I'm very glad to be asked because, as you know, I mean, I have a very strong connection with the Buddhist Gate in Berlin, and I've been to the English-speaking group quite a few times, and feel a very strong connection. And I'm really sorry not to be. Well, it's very unlikely that I'll go in April. Hopefully, I'll get there again this year. We'll just have to see. So I'm really glad to be in connection. And I suppose the other thing I'd just like to say for the people in Berlin, it's great to be able to share Padmaloka a little bit with you. We're to the eastern end of the shrine room, and as you can see, there's an akshobhya here. If you can see it on the video, I don't know if you can. You can see the akshobhya. And there are different bodhisattvas all around, and these tiles of painted Buddhas, which is a whole project we've got going on. Aloka, of course, is the artist who's blessed us with these wonderful images all over the shrine room. And he did a woodblock print of a Buddha image, which we then we made a great big rubber stamp, and we print them on these pieces of wood. And you can participate if you want to. We can send you a Buddha tile if you're interested. Man, woman, adult, child, might be something in isolation that you can do. Painting a Buddha tile and then sending it back to us, and we'll put them up on the wall. And maybe one day some of you will even visit Padmaloka. I hope you will. So it's great to be sharing Padmaloka with you, and great to have Tarapalita here. Because I know how much he's doing in Berlin, how much he loves the Sangha, English-speaking Sangha. It's so evident he cares very much for you all. And of course he used to live here, so we've got him back, and hopefully he'll be back with you soon, but we're loving having him here. So a little bit of background for you. And there's some friends here also participating from the community in this question and answer session. Great.
Thank you for that. And I took a video of the shrine room yesterday.
Oh, good.
So maybe I'll post
Great.
that as well.
Oh, do put that. Give me pass that on.
So should we start?
Yeah, do please.
So the first question is from me. Could you say something about how to deal with negative mental states if you're self-isolating alone or with family or friends in a big city like Berlin, or it could be London? In a way, the other side to that is how can we brighten our mind and mental states?
That's a lovely phrase.
Yeah.
Brighten our mind and mental states. Lovely phrase. Very good way of putting it. I think, first of all, I'd like to answer that question by saying, of course, I can't talk from experience here because I'm not alone or just with, one other person or a small family. Here at Padmaloka, we have the great good fortune of being in this incredible environment. There are 18 of us, and we have large grounds, we have a lot of rooms, we have an amazing shrine space, it's like a shrine, Padmaloka. It's a holy place with the relics of Bhante's teacher, Dada Rinpoche, outside and so on. So we're very, very fortunate indeed. And we need to be continually aware of that, our great good fortune. And we also need to support people who are on their own in much more difficult and demanding circumstances. So I really want to acknowledge that that I'm speaking from a position of great privilege and fortune. So when I suggest some things, it's with that background. I'm fully aware of, you know, how well we're doing, and it's easy in a sense for me to say things. But I think the first thing to do is to acknowledge that, you know, for a lot of people, maybe not for some people, maybe some people really like being on their own, just with a few others. Yeah, very happy with that. But for a lot of people, it is very demanding. There's quite a number of questions to do with this, because we are social creatures, human beings. We, you know, others are very important to us, and we gain so much from human communication and friendship and fellow feeling. And it can be really hard if it's an imposed isolation. I mean, you might choose to be isolated happily, but you always know you can go and see someone. You always know that you can do that. But that being taken away, that's very difficult. Even if the way you see people is just to go to the shops, or you know, or the different things that you do, it really does challenge our positive dependence on other people. And I think we need to really acknowledge that first of all, and perhaps even acknowledge how much we need other people. I think the world has, because of technology, it does seem to be possible for people to spend a lot of time not with real people, but with sort of virtual people. I had this terrible experience the other day in London at rush hour, trying to catch a train. It was before the coronavirus restrictions really hit, and I was literally nearly being run over by people who were rushing to get to places while looking at their iPhones, and they weren't aware of me or other people at all. So they were aware of people online or the news or whatever it might be, but they weren't aware of the actual people around them. And perhaps one of the things that might come out of this is the need to be fully present to other people. So I think first of all, just acknowledge this is a demanding situation. And if we acknowledge that, first of all, we then have to take the next step, which is I am going to have to change my habits. I'm going to have to change what I do with my mind. I'm going to have to do some different things. I think that's the first thing, that this new set of circumstances requires a completely different relationship to myself, to the way my mind works, what I do each day, and my relationship with the world. So I think that's the first thing, just to acknowledge that. Okay, this has happened. It's no use feeling upset about that. We are upset, but not for too long. It's nobody's fault. It's happened. We're in this situation. Now I need to get to grips with my mind. So the great thing is, it's demanding that we really practice those first two verses of the Dhammapada that I've talked a lot about, that say this is, you could say this is the basic Buddhist attitude, that we are responsible for our experience. We are responsible for our mental states. We are responsible for our well-being. We're responsible for our happiness and our sorrow. Our mind creates our experience. Our mind creates our world. So we're in a sort of almost enforced retreat. It's very challenging, I think, where you have perhaps family members who don't, or you're with people who don't think in those terms. But then you're going to have to convince them that there's going to have to be a different way of going about things. So I think the first thing to brighten one's mental states is to just realise, I've got to do something. I've got to do something very positive now. And this is where things like meditation and devotional practice, creative activity, I think is going to be really important. I mean, we could go through a sort of list of things, but perhaps it's not appropriate to do that at the moment. But if perhaps if we don't really take hold of ourselves, the danger is that we are going to get very depressed and very unhappy, and we've really got to resist that. We've got to push against that as much as we possibly can. And this is where I think technology is also our saviour, because we can be in touch with people who are suggesting all sorts of positive ways of working. We're trying to do a bit. You're doing something by carrying on teaching. We're going to do regular things here. I'll do a talk every Tuesday. So that there is some sangha, some input, and some ideas coming in. And, perhaps people can do that, do all those things that they've promised themselves that they do when they have the time. Maybe drawing, painting, writing, doing nothing, looking out the window at the beautiful emerging spring if they can, hopefully if they're allowed out, going for some walks and things like that, and on their own, and just looking at the beauty around without trying to get anything, without trying to have anything. And yes, regular meditation, if you're doing devotional practice, regular devotional practice. I think all these things would be very helpful, but you have to make continuous effort. And this is one of the things that is a bit challenging. But all those teachings of the great Buddhist masters, seeing danger in the little faults, danger in those states of mind which bring you down, which are more dark and depressive. They say this because, all the great masters, you see, have spent so much time in retreat. So they know what it's like. They know what can happen if you let your mind run, dwelling on negative things. They know that will create a very unpleasant environment. That's why they give these teachings. The other thing is having said that, there does need to be a sort of, I'm not very, I'm going to use a phrase that I don't usually use. You do actually have to be kind to yourself as well. In a way, what you've got to internalise, I think, at this time, what you have to imagine is the best kind of spiritual friend. But internalise it, the best kind of Kalyana Mitra. Imagine them talking to you, encouraging you, saying, oh, that little inspiration there, that's good, follow that, do that. Or hang on, be careful, you're getting into something negative there. So if you feel that you haven't got the resources, imagine a friend. Imagine that you're with someone who will really encourage you in the best possible way. Yeah, so there's a few thoughts there. I hope they're helpful. And like I say, I'm speaking from a very privileged environment where we're constantly encouraging one another. I'm happy to admit that I wouldn't find it easy. If I was in an apartment in Berlin, much as I love Berlin, and I couldn't go out, say, I'd find that very, very challenging. Yeah.
I think, like you said, though, it's those first two parts of the Dhammapada. It's almost like it's become very real.
It's become very real.
I feel it myself. I feel like I have a real. Now is the time to really be aware of that. Because if it starts to slide, you can get to some very spongy, strange states of mind.
Yes.
So on a positive,
what the Buddha says, the images he uses for the mind are very interesting. He says mind is the leader, in the sense that in the sense of producing experience. That what you do with your mind leads. It's not saying that there isn't an outside world that affects you. Of course, that's the case. That Buddhism doesn't say that the coronavirus isn't there and all these things aren't really happening. No, they're happening. But in terms of how you respond to that, it's the mind that is going to change your relationship to it. The mind leads. The mind is the chief. Manu setta is a very interesting word, setta. A seti is a chief, a sort of headman in Pali. So it's saying the mind is the chief, is the chieftain, is the sort of leader in that sense. So we need to this is something really powerful. So we need to make sure we've got a good chief in our mind, a good king or queen even of our mind, because so that it's really making things happen in the best possible way. Perhaps thinking of your mind as electing in your mind. I've sometimes said this: the wise and glorious king or queen, if you prefer, to really do the very best for your experience. That might be a good way of thinking. So mind is the chief, and mind creates. Mano Maya. Maya means to create. It's the word for art. So there's this idea that we're always creating our experience. We're forming our experiences as if our experience is like a lump of clay. And it could be anything. And we could either make something really monstrous and ugly and a complete mess, or we could fashion experience into something Buddha-like. So I think this is a very, very inspiring way of thinking about what the mind can actually do. Yeah.
Thank you. Great. So maybe the next question we'll have from Rob. Hello, Rob.
Hello, Rob. I'm picturing you ask this question.
All right. So Rob says, the coronavirus outbreak is unprecedented in our lifetimes and has brought waves of change with it. It also demonstrates the universal principle of conditionality, whether related to the conditions in the market in China, where it more than likely originated from, or the way it spreads to our world, or the impact that less social contact has on us. So the outbreak is an opportunity to become more aware of this principle. Similarly, we're now becoming accustomed to seeing how interdependent we all are, how interconnected we are, and how also all nations and peoples are equalized by this virus. It visits us all. Some people are also realizing how valuable family, friendship, and social contact is, like you just said, and how important small acts of kindness and generosity can be. It's having all sorts of impacts. There are many ways that people in the world may react to the outbreak, certainly once the world begins to recover, both skillfully and unskillfully. However, I wonder if, given the above, this may be an opportunity for Buddhists to share the Dharma with more people, those whose eyes have been opened to some degree by their experiences. Can Buddhism grow in the aftermath of the coronavirus?
Well, one hopes so. I certainly hope the Dharma can help people in this time. I think the Dharma can, because there is so much emphasis on individual responsibility. Yes, we are profoundly interconnected, and more than ever with globalization and so on, and ease of travel. Unfortunately, I think that perhaps the tendency with globalization, again, it's a mixed picture in terms of ease of communication, ease of travel, and so on. Has very positive aspects, but of course a lot of it is to do with our own consuming. A lot of what goes on, a lot of problems in the world is because we've set up a world in which people continually want, and so on. So yes, things are interconnected, but they're kind of interconnected in the wrong way. More to do with what people are getting, and certainly that isn't the Buddhist vision of interconnection and of Pratitya Samutpada, as he's indicating, to do with acts of kindness and so on. And what will happen, people will realise that we have to live very, very differently now. And there needs to be far more emphasis on duty rather than rights, perhaps, or generosity rather than getting and taking, and that we have a responsibility to the world, and we have to make a positive contribution to it. Perhaps that will come. I must admit, I don't want to sound cynical. I will believe it when I see it, because I think there is such an addiction to having and getting and holding on to It's very, very deep in human nature, and that has been, we've been very strongly conditioned to that. But perhaps at a time like this, people will start turning, to different ways of living, and whether or not they become Buddhist, that's another point. But I hope it could be other traditions that they decide to get involved with. But I think the main thing that I would really want to see is that, yes, be aware of the interdependence of everything, be aware of conditioned co-production, and realise that you need to take responsibility for your part in that, and to really be more sensitive to the impact that you have on others and on the world around you. I think that is what, that's what really comes of this. And yes, he mentioned as well the importance of family and friends and the social. And of course, we have a great need to be loved and nurtured and so on. There's another question about this I think that's going to come up. But I think, of course, if you really want love and friendship, you have to love and be a friend first. This sense of being passive or making demands upon other people, I think, is one of the reasons why we can end up in these sorts of messes. We've got to reverse all that. We've got to develop a new mind, a new consciousness, whereby we are the person who is radiating loving kindness and generosity and manifesting friendship, rather than sort of expecting it or demanding it or just being very complacent about it. Yeah.
Great. So we've got 3 questions from Tanya. Hello, Tanya.
Hello, Tanya.
So the first question, she asks, can you articulate a bit about the differences / relationship between fearlessness, courage, freedom?
Well, fearlessness is, let's look at that first. To be completely fearless, to be Abhaya, and over there we have Amoga Siddhi. It's where I'm meditating at the moment, next to Amoga Siddhi. He has the mudra of fearlessness, the gift of Abhaya, no fear. He is the green Buddha of the north, very mysterious figure, and he is the embodiment of enlightened fearlessness. And he's fearless, and the Buddha is fearless, because of course there's no ego. That's been completely seen through. There's no sense of, no craving, no attachment to a sort of fixed and separate self. So there's no ill will, there's nothing to protect. And of course there's no delusion, because that is the nature of things. So if one feels fear, don't feel bad about that. Because I know sometimes in the past when I used to feel fear, I think, oh, why am I feeling fear? I'm a Buddhist, I shouldn't be fearful. Well, yeah, you might be a Buddhist, but you're not a Buddha. So there will be fear, while we have this sort of sense of fixed self-identity and all the attachment and protectiveness around that, we will have fear, because we're trying to protect something that doesn't really exist. So it's a Buddha who is fearless. It's a Buddha who is without fear. And it is interesting as well that Amoga Siddhi is the embodiment of a particular kind of wisdom. It's called the all-accomplishing wisdom. It's that wisdom of the Buddha, which is what he accomplishes is spontaneous compassionate activity. Spontaneous in the sense that it's not it's not conditioned, as it were, by anything. It's just an immediate responsiveness to what needs to be done. So you can see that the relationship between freedom then and fearlessness. When you are without that sort of self-clinging, there's nothing between you and what needs to happen. That's why the Buddha's compassion is very mysterious. It's not like our love and compassion, which is, it's supported and constructed by our efforts and so on, which is important. You need to do all that. But at the level of a Buddha, it's immediate and responsive. We might have little glimpses of that sometimes. But that's the relationship between fearlessness and freedom, I think. It's not freedom from, well, it is freedom from, if you like, the tyranny of a certain notion of fixed selfhood, well, a notion of fixed selfhood. That is a sort of tyranny. But it's freedom too. It's the freedom to act and respond in the most immediate and the best possible way.
Do you have any thoughts about then courage, how that fits in?
Well, courage,
freedom from fear, isn't
yes,
it?
courage is different.
Yeah.
I think courage is, I can't remember my etymology, but it must be something to do with heart. Is it from French? Courage? Cour? Is it to do with heart? Parvaka? We have a Frenchman here. So, I think, because we sometimes say this when somebody's frightened or going through a difficult time, we say, well, take heart. Don't use it so much these days in English, but that's courage. That, okay, there's a frightening situation, which can be very intimidating, but don't be intimidated. Keep going forward with your skillful action. Don't be deflected from that. Take heart. Connect with, your deeper aspiration. It's very interesting in the life of the Buddha before his enlightenment. There's a sutta describing a period in his life where it's called the Bhaya Bera Sutta. Bhaya Bera, the panic, fear and dread sutta. Panic. Yeah, you quite like the sound of that, don't you? Panic, fear and dread sutta. And what he reflects that supposing I go to the dense forest, the densest part of the jungle, the thickets, on those nights when there is no moon. Suppose I go no moon, so I go deeply into this darkness. If I still have attachment to self, world, and so on, I will experience fear. I want to test whether I have it. And of course, he goes in and this terrible fear arises. He's sitting in there, or lying in there, or walking in there, and there's a movement from some jungle animal. And he said the panic, fear, and dread arose in him, So his hair's standing on end, his skin's creeping. And he says that whenever that happened, he would just carry on with what he was doing. In other words, he didn't distract himself from it. If he was lying down, he stayed lying down. If he was walking, he stayed walking. If he was meditating, he stayed meditating until that fear, that panic, fear and dread subsided, passed away. Of course, the Buddha had a very strong vision, even before his enlightenment. He had this tremendous sort of vision of making himself into a man of mastery, an enlightened man. So that vision is very alive for him. It's not just gritting his teeth. It's staying in touch with that deeper vision of things. So if you're feeling fear, don't be intimidated. Carry on with what you're doing. The fear might come when you're washing up. You have some thoughts that go through your mind about what's happening. Carry on washing up. Just wash up. Bring a lot of mindfulness to what is happening. Sometimes the fear can arise very, very strongly in meditation. That can be because something deeper is opening up. And stay with it. Stay. Just be gentle. Bring a lot of metta to what is happening, and move forward in that way. So courage is. There was a book that was very popular years ago that I never read, but people quoted it: "Fear the fear, feel the fear, and do it anyway," which is probably quite a good slogan. Take heart, have courage.
It seems like definitely now is the time to kind of have that at the forefront of one's mind, because it seems like one congeals. You get the fear, and then you all start
Yes.
shrinking and behaving in ways that you find bad. So.
And courage is very much the quality of a bodhisattva warrior, a bodhisattva hero or heroine, of any kind of warrior, in fact. You know, warriors aren't fearless. They usually have a very, very keen awareness of what might happen. They have to have that. But they're courageous. They're courageous. They don't lose heart. You know, and we shouldn't feel in any way bad about being fearful of the future, of what's going to happen. And there's a lot to be objectively fearful about, I would say, in terms of how all this is going to turn out. But be courageous with your mind. Be courageous with your response. Be courageous with your generosity. Going back to Rob's question, you're hearing these incredible stories of people being in situations where there is a real objective, objectively they could catch this virus. And we've had communications from people in the health service who are at the front line, and Padmavajra's mother is, at the front line in a hospital and so on. That is something to be fearful of. But these people are incredibly courageous. They're going to stay, in that situation and respond. And we really must salute these incredible people. And yes, if we're frightened about the future, be courageous with your mind. You could even think in terms of, well, actually my circumstances are pretty good. But what about all those people who are facing far more demanding and dangerous situations? So you don't fixate on your own fear. You identify those who are in much more demanding and challenging situations.
Great. So Tanya's second question is, she says, talk a bit about the transference of merits and the fifth stage of the metta-bhavana. It's a bit like what you were saying in a way, bearing people in mind.
Yes.
To take it off yourself somehow.
Well, I think that's one of the things we really have to do a lot of work on during this time, because we're so apart from people. We've got to have a vivid sense of the world around us, and this is again where technology helps us, because there's a lot of information out there, and there's also people that we know, how they're getting on, and we can sort of think beyond that of the whole world, as it were, imaginatively. And we yes, in the metta-bhavana, we should spend a long time doing the metta-bhavana for as many people as we can possibly think of. So in that fifth stage, you do it to the 4 people, you equalise the feeling, and then you build up, you go beyond, and you just keep bringing to mind particular people, dwelling on them, widening, and you probably know people in other countries and other continents. Well, connect with them in that stage, and then just try to imagine, all beings. Now, some people might say, well, what good does that do? But I think it does a lot of good. I'm convinced that if more people did the metta-bhavana for more people, the world would be a better place. We need to remember that the Buddhist vision, again, it all comes back to this thing of the power of mind. I think we, in the West, because we associate mind so much with intellect, whereas the word chitta in Buddhism means both head and heart and will, volition. It's got all of that meaning in it. Mind in Buddhism is very, very powerful. And the more concentrated your mind, the more concentrated and absorbed you are in loving kindness, in generosity, that will transmit. This is what the Buddhist tradition says. It will have an effect. It doesn't absolve one from actually doing actual things with body and speech. We have to do that. But at this time, especially, the mind becomes perhaps even more crucial. And it's almost magical power to kind of affect the world around. This might sound strange to people, but this is very much the Buddhist tradition. You know, the mind emanates, it transmits, and sometimes you can experience that. I've certainly had experiences where, remember I was in India, living in India, when I first went there with Lokamitra, and Lokamitra was really my leader, you know, and spiritual friend. You know, he's an incredible man, really establishing the Dharma powerfully in Pune, in India again, with, you know, Bhante's disciples in Maharashtra, and so on. And he went away to do some teaching in another state, and so that left me alone, carrying on the Dharma, not with the intensity that he had, because I couldn't do that in those days, but doing what I could. And of course I really missed him. You know, I really found that quite difficult, and I did a lot of metabhavana, bringing him to mind. And there were times when I knew he was doing metabhavana at the same time, or, you know, I experiencing a lot of waves of loving kindness, and we talked, and when he came back, and we realised that we were very, very aware of each other, and he was a tremendous support for me. Because I felt quite isolated at that time, even with very, very good Indian friends. But I was, you know, very young. I was in my early 20s. So I've got great faith in the power of loving kindness. And transference of merits is a sort of extension of that, really. It's perhaps it's even in some ways more profound, or if anything could be more profound than universal loving kindness, because what you're doing in transference of merits is that you're making this very, very strong heart wish, this wish of the deepest part of you, this strong will, if you like, in the best sense, strong wishing prayer, that whatever the good in you that you've done in your life is for others. You give it up, you give it away, you transfer it to everybody else, you know, and you make the wish that anything good that you do is for others. You make that dedication. Whatever talents you have, whatever abilities you have, whatever virtue you have, you just keep giving it away. Of course, that doesn't mean that you're impoverished, far from it. You become richer, but it's as if there's this dedication that your life will be for everybody from now on, because the transference of merits is related to the Bodhisattva vow, that you're making a solemn oath that your life is dedicated not just to your own welfare, but for the welfare of everybody. That's what you're doing with that. You're changing your orientation. So very, very powerful and important practices. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So her last question, it's kind of a large question, but she says, talk about ritual and devotion, and maybe some indications on the setup of a home shrine, smiley face.
Yes. So this is Tanya from Italy.
Yeah.
Hello, Tanya. I do remember you. Yes. That's a great question, I think, because at a time like this, I think it is very important to have tangible images of our ideals and our values, which is what a Buddhist shrine is. You know, what you have on a shrine is a part of your room, or even a dedicated room if you have the space, which is going to be where you contemplate what is central to your life. That's what a shrine is. So, you know, you obviously it will vary depending on the sort of space you have, but it's good to have a permanent place, I think, which you devote to meditation. A corner of your bedroom or living room or something like that, and it can be as elaborate or as simple as you like. And find some, a box or a small table that's pleasing. Maybe you've got some nice cloths that you could cover that with, or not, depends on your aesthetic. Could be very simple. And you find an image, a Buddha image, or a reproduction of a Buddhist painting or something like that. It's good, I think, to have the Buddha, the historical Buddha, to have Shakyamuni as the sort of centre. So you've got a very, very clear image of enlightenment, of wisdom and compassion and mindfulness. And then you might have other images as well which particularly inspire you, and arrange them very nicely. And always good to have, to keep it clean. If you have a shrine, keep it clean. I mean, one of the things that is very noticeable in, I'm afraid I don't always keep my shrine clean, which is terrible. But we should have the attitude, this is the holy of holies, if you like, in our life. So let's keep that really clean. I remember an order member, a friend of mine, was who died many years ago. He was talking to a Tibetan Lama about whether or not he could take up tantric practice and what would he need to do that. And they were sitting in his room, with his shrine room. And this Tibetan Lama says, well, you could start by cleaning your shrine, which I thought was quite interesting. You can forget about all these special practices. If you can't clean your shrine, there's the sort of basics that are missing, because that's the way you're treating the symbols of your ideals, of the three jewels, of the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. So have a lovely space that you keep clean. Have a nice vase of flowers. Always have flowers. Candles, and you can offer incense. There are other offerings you can have, but have those three basics which do symbolize something. And traditionally they say before you even meditate, it's good to clean the shrine, make the offerings, and then you sit, and you might also repeat some Buddhist verses or something like that, some puja verses. And then, when you come to meditate, you're ready. You've set yourself, very beautifully. And the thing is, what you're doing, the thing about this sort of activity, is that you're objectifying. I've talked a lot about mind, but in a way that can feel very inside, very subjective. I think if we're not just a mind, we're also a body and speech. It needs to come into the public reality. So, okay, if you don't feel that you want to have a Buddha image, you don't feel ready for that, have a lovely part of your house or your room with flowers and something lovely, just somewhere where you just go and sit, and which is a different space. That's a good thing. We do need to create conditions that support what we're doing with our minds.
I was thinking maybe especially now.
Yes.
If you're confined into a flat or something, to have a kind of space where you can actually go. That's has a whole set of values and beauty.
Yes, a special place. An altar, a shrine, a special room if you can have that, and really treat it very well every day. Make that part of your practice. Make that part of your life.
I'm aware of time. We've got a lot of questions left, so we can either have a break, because we've got quite a few questions left, or we could do it another day.
I'm okay to keep going. Do you want a bit of a break? Our little audience here.
Everyone's okay?
How are you doing, Satyakirti?
I can break soonish.
Yeah. Shall we? How many more questions have we got?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Let's take a break. That's quite a lot for people to get on with for now.
Yeah.
And we'll arrange another session.
Fantastic.
Shall we do that?
Let's do that.
At some point? I don't know when we'll do that, but perhaps we can. I've got a lot of free time at the moment.
So do I.
But we also, others are working, so we need to respect that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
A pleasure.
Yeah.
Good to be in touch with Berlin. Yeah. So we'll do that soon.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much.